please welcome Alzbeta Klein, CEO and Director General of the International Fertilizer Association, to the stage for a conversation on sustainable agriculture at scale with FP's Andrew Sollinger.
Good afternoon. Let's pick it up a little bit. Good afternoon. Thank you. I know it's late. We have so much great content left. By the way, in addition to this fantastic conversation with Alzbeta, we'll be speaking with Food for the Hungry, and we're going to finish off with actually a new addition, Scott Nathan, who's the head of the International Development Finance Corporation. So please do stick around for that. That should be an interesting conversation as well. Alzbeta, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're really looking forward to this discussion on fertilizer. If you were here earlier today, you heard some of my conversation with Agnes Kalibata, Dr. Kalibata, brilliant head of AGRA, and we talked a bit about fertilizers in Africa and the importance of building an indigenous fertilizer industry in Africa to reinvigorating the soil there. IFA has a massive role to play in that. But I really just wanted to start really quickly, if you would, Alzbeta, just describing IFA. What is it? What's the mission? What do you do at IFA?
Right. So first of all, great to be here in front of you, and great to come after Agnes Kalibata, dear friend. So what is IFA? International Fertilizer Association, one of the largest and oldest industry association, established in 1927. We have a very simple mission, and I say simple in quotes, help feed the world sustainably. And it took us many, many years. Actually, it took us the war in Ukraine to figure out that without fertilizers, we do not know how to feed the world. There is 7-8 billion of us today. There's going to be 10 billion of us in 20, 30 years. And we have to figure out how to feed ourselves sustainably.
Very good. So you told me before this discussion that we don't know how to feed ourselves.
No, we don't.
My mother would agree with you, but that is not, I think, what you were saying. What do you mean by that? We don't know how to feed ourselves.
There is a lot to be done in feeding ourselves better. And on this stage, we have heard earlier today about food systems transformation based on the UN Food Systems Summit. So what it means is that to grow food that we eat every day, we need 3 macronutrients. And those are basically potash, phosphate, and nitrogen. And we haven't figured out, our biology, chemistry, physics research hasn't figured out how to do it without those nutrients. And Andrew, we talked about it in our earlier conversation. Agriculture is like banking. You can quote me on that. Why is it like banking? Because when you plant something, that plant takes nutrients from soil. And those nutrients need to be replenished. And they can come from sources which are mineral fertilizers. They can come from organic fertilizers. They can come from anywhere. They can come from microbes. They can come from biologicals. But fundamentally, the equation doesn't change. You grow a plant, the plant takes nutrient from soil, and we have to replenish it. And it took us all the way to the war in Ukraine in 2020, in last year, to figure out that without fertilizers, in whatever form and shape they come, we do not know how to feed ourselves. And 2 out of these critical 3 fertilizers come from the ground. They are mined commodities, potash and phosphate, so they have issues related to mining. But 1 needs a lot of energy to be produced, and that's ammonia. And we haven't figured out at scale how to actually do that.
So how are we working on that project to try and figure out how to do that sustainably at scale?
We need a whole lot of renewable energy to make it happen. So we are sitting here at the Climate Week, and the critical piece for getting ammonia to be green ammonia, is to scale up to the power of N, the renewable energy available to actually produce ammonia. Fortunately, here in the United States, we have done a piece of legislation called IRA, which allows to produce ammonia using carbon sequestration. And that's a huge step. So that's called blue ammonia in the language of chemistry and engineering. And that goes a long way to sequester some of the carbon related to production of ammonia. But we have a long way to go to do that at scale. We have a long way to go to get it to other countries outside of the United States, and also to produce ammonia closer to where it's used, closer to the farms, using biomaterials and other products.
So, we're going a long way there. Tell me about the most important considerations for making farming and fertilizer more sustainable. How do we have to think about that?
So I think the critical piece is to take into account that agriculture accounts for about a third of the global emissions. And what we have to think about is the entire value chain. We have to think about all the way from the farmer to the consumer. And when you say that you want to decarbonize, we have to decarbonize the whole value chain. This is not about commitment at the level of one of the FMCGs, fast-moving consumer good companies, saying, okay, we'd like to decarbonize the value chain. Because the closer you get to the farmer, the more work needs to be done. And we have to work at that level from the beginning, from the farm all the way. So how do we go about it? We start at the farm, and it's about scale. We know how to do low-carbon agriculture, but we haven't figured out how to scale it, and we need to find a way to scale it. So at IFA, we have a broad 10 strategy. We invited everyone to join us. If you produce fertilizers from organic sources, welcome. If you produce fertilizers from microbes, you are welcome. We have a startup program. We bring startups to work with us and to help us scale it. We welcome all the initiatives by the government here in the United States, but also elsewhere, to scale up startups in climate smart agri, because that's the way to go. And then we have to work with farmers to adopt these practices. And we have heard on this stage that for farmers to adopt those practices, there have to be incentives. There have to be some carrots to be able to do that. I think we have the theory right, but we have to really scale it up. That is the name of the game.
Can we talk a little bit about unintended consequences when we try and move towards sustainability and things that might occur that we really don't expect to happen, that take us in the wrong direction?
Food systems are inherently extremely complex, and you try to move one part of it, and you actually can mess up quite a bit elsewhere. So let me give you an example. Ammonia is being used today, or is being considered today, potentially as a fuel for ships, as a lower carbon shipping fuel. It doesn't take a lot to think about a situation where large shipping companies are going to be purchasing ammonia, and needless to say, they have much better resources than poor farmers in sub-Saharan Africa. So that ammonia will be priced for the shipping. And what I worry about is what happens to farmers in sub-Saharan Africa, what happens to farmers in Southeast Asia who are not going to be able to afford it. The second unintended consequence of things that we try to do and then we mess up something else is that ammonia can be used to help decarbonize coal energy production. And today we are seeing some movement to decarbonize in Japan and in South Korea. And again, that's great. We need to move away from coal. But at the same time, I have the same worries about the availability of fertilizers for poor farmers anywhere in the world. And I'm very proud of the initiative that we've done at IFA together with Rabobank and the Gates Foundation called Sustain Africa. Because last year, after the war started in Ukraine, we had a major issue of availability of fertilizers. Mm-hmm. And the industry, for the first time ever, stepped up, delivered discounted fertilizer to 1.5 million farmers in a space of 6 months. So very proud of what can be done when you have a meeting of minds of public sector, private sector, few incentives in there, and you can actually deliver to the farmer what they need to have.
What is the biggest challenge that you face right now in galvanizing those kinds of partnerships? You know, one of the things we were joking about, fertilizers, when we think about agriculture, when we think about what we're doing, they're essential. Not just necessary, they're essential. And there are examples in recent history of failed experiments trying to move from towards organic fertilization. Terrible scenario and collapse in Sri Lanka and the agricultural economy there. A year or two ago when this happened. How do we elevate that thinking around fertilizers and the IFA as you move towards sustainability when it is kind of looked at as something that's necessary but not necessarily desirable?
Absolutely. So I think a few things that come to mind. First of all, we need to realize that if we want to move into different type of agriculture systems, different kind of food systems, we have to do it gradually. There will be a transition. Just like here in the hallways of New York during the Climate Week, we talk about the energy transition. We will need to talk about agriculture transition. We know that we need to help those farmers to make those changes. So that's one. The second thing we need to think about is scale. The scale of today's use of mineral fertilizers is enormous. It's a scale that requires infrastructure, a scale that requires ports and shipping companies and everything else to get it to the farmer. And what we need to do at this point in time is to make sure that it's available. Because if we consider grains and oilseeds essential goods, you have to consider fertilizers essential goods, because without them, we are not going to produce in the quantity that helps feed the world. But the critical piece for all of us in the room and in the industry that I represent
and online
is to think about, and online, is to think about the sequencing of sustainability and food security. And some people will tell you, oh, we have to take care about food security first. And I would submit in this forum is that we have to do sustainability and food security absolutely at the same time. We do not have a luxury to take one and then think about the other. We have to go with food security and with sustainability in a food system together, and today, not tomorrow.
Inexorably linked. That's a great way to end it. Thank you so much, Alzbeta,
Thank you.
for coming
Thank you for
and
the opportunity.
explaining to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next up, please welcome to the stage Isabel Coleman, Deputy Administrator for Policy and Planning at UC.